This is Wayne Jones, and you're listening to the Matt Balaker podcast.
Good day, fine people out there. Thank you once again for tuning in to the Matt Balaker podcast. And if you could do me a favor, please gently click like, subscribe, and share. There are actually 3 different buttons, but you can gently click all of them. It really helps my self-esteem and just overall purpose in life. You guys are in for a tremendous treat today because our guest is a podcaster, a copy editor, the Canadian author of Greg Giraldo, A Comedian Story. Please join me in welcoming someone I've known for far too long, my good friend, Wayne Jones. How you doing, Wayne?
It's nice to see you, Matt. Thanks for that. Yeah. And I'm glad to meet and see again the American author of the Greg Giraldo book. Yeah.
We went one per North American country. I think anything more than that would get a little too crowded in the Greg Giraldo book niche. But yeah, we'll certainly talk about that. But actually, although we've worked together for years, I don't know that much about where you grew up other than some country north of us. So I know you're on the East Coast of Canada, but what was life like for a younger Wayne Jones?
Yeah, I'm in Canada, which is a large mass of land just north of the United States of America. And it has, we have 10 provinces and 3 territories. And we're actually the second biggest landmass country in the world after Russia, I think, or something like that. We're a large, but a lot of it way up north is ice. Mm-hmm. So if you imagine 10 continents going from east to west. On the west coast, people probably know Vancouver. That's in the province of British Columbia. I grew up in the province that's exactly on the east, which everyone mispronounces and calls it Newfoundland, but it's Newfoundland. And I was born in a small town called Corner Brook, which still exists and has about 20,000 people.
So Corner Brook, and ever since we've connected, it's been involved in writing, books, reading to some extent. Where did you get this love for reading and writing, Wayne?
I was kind of like a nerdy and a school kid when I grew up. So when I went through grade school and all that, I was interested in academics more than girls were interested in me. So I stuck.
Yeah, what's that like? Can you share? I'm curious. It's so different.
And so I like learning, and I was I read a lot and that sort of thing. And then when I went to university, I didn't do any planning because I ended up with 2 English degrees. One was a bachelor's and one was a master's. So obviously I wasn't looking to make any money.
So where did you go to university?
I went to university in central Canada, which is where the province where I live now is in the middle of Canada. It's called Ontario. And if people have heard of any city in Canada, they've heard of Toronto. Sure. So I went to, at the University of Toronto, which is one of the biggest universities in North America. That's where I got my master's of arts. And I got my other degree back in Newfoundland, the bachelor's degree.
So culturally, what was it like? We'll call it moving westward, because you grew up on the East Coast, and I won't call it Newfoundland. You moved more to the center of the country. Aside from the school part, what were some of the major adjustments you faced?
It wasn't so much. It wasn't really culturally. It was moving from a town that at that time had about 25 or 30,000 people to a city that had, Toronto at the time probably had 2 million people. And I was living alone as well, right? I had no friends or anything like that, apart from who I met at university. So that was a big adjustment. And I was what would I have been in my late teens, early 20s or something. So that was a big deal. And it was a big university and everything. So that was probably the biggest adjustment. I remember just small things like, oh my God, you can buy the New York Times here. You couldn't buy that in my hometown. And I remember getting a copy and feeling very, wow, I'm able to read this. And now it's embarrassing to say it now because, of course, I could go online now and read lots of the New York Times and not be, if I can put it this way, kind of intimidated by it. Mm-hmm. But I remember thinking, I'm not worthy of this in a certain kind of way. And that was the big adjustment. And culturally, it mostly had to do with the size of the city. Although I did maintain a pretty small circle. I was living in a small Portuguese neighborhood and in a small, bachelor apartment. And, it's not as if I went and explored the town. I didn't have a lot of money either. So this was back in this would have been the early 80s, something like that. Yeah.
So, I think it's always a fun time, to be a college student, but that seems like a particularly fun time. Not all your bad choices were documented on social media for your friends to see.
That's right. Thank you. Yes,
so I think you mentioned, do you speak French?
Oui, je parle français.
I assume that means yes. That shows, I'm an American, so I know one language. How has that helped you? Other than impressing the ladies, like, did you learn it growing up, or how did you kind of develop your other language?
I'm not sure it's impressed the ladies, but it's or the gentlemen.
I'm moderately impressed. I must say that accent was quite convincing.
So I've impressed the stand-up comedian, but that's about it. Yeah, I learned it. We had a very good program when I was in grade school. It was my minor when I was at university. And I've kept at it as if I'm like, I don't mean I was like a monk all these years. I get up at 5
in
o'clock.
Solitude.
And study French. But I've just taken opportunities. Like, for example, I'm a retired person now, but when I was working, my last couple of years of working at a university as a librarian, I had a French tutor just come in one hour a week just to talk to me. So I've always made some kind of effort to read a French book, whatever. So I can carry on a fairly good conversation in French, and I consider myself, I guess, bilingual. Anyway,
well, very very cultured. I'm impressed. So you had a French minor and you majored in English, you mentioned, and I remember my older brother Ted was an English major, and I think I didn't major in that partly because he was, and I wanted to do something different. I remember just kind of scrolling through, and I picked economics because I didn't really study it much in high school, and that was honestly like the thought process. So I figured I can change it. I didn't know that much about it, so I was like, whatever. And but what made you select English?
It was because I was always very interested in languages. I was always interested in reading. So there's where you get the sort of the combination of studying literature. I always wanted to study literature, and also minoring in French. I loved language and linguistics and things like that. And at the time too, the other two languages I studied in university, and I don't speak either of these at all. But I can recognize them. I did Latin. It was back in the time when you can study Latin. And I also studied German for a couple of years. And I really loved both of those. And, life is like, when, you always had to make choices. Mm-hmm. If I knew if I were to live to be 900 years old, like some of the people in, what's that book called? Oh, the Bible. I would fully learn German. I would learn Latin, Hebrew, the whole thing. But, you've only got I'm 63, so I've only got another 35 years to live. So
35 plus 800 or so, but yeah.
Yeah, 899 years old. You think I'm cranky now?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I'm glad we're recording now. This will be awful in a half millennia or so. So what was your first, so you finished college, then what was your first quote unquote real job or venture after college?
My first real job was basically I had 2 English degrees, so I was kind of I don't want to be unemployable basically for any kind of real job, but basically I had to go and get another master's degree, which is in what used to be called library science way back when. It is now usually called information science. Mm-hmm. So I have a degree in that as well, and then that basically set me that was a certificate I had that gave me a 30 plus year career in working in academic libraries.
So it's basically saying libraries, hire me or else I'll be really pissed off. So years ago, I worked with 2 people that had library science degrees, and they created some company, or they helped create some company in that printed out reprints, like academic papers. They would make it legal so you could reprint. But I never really picked their brains. Like what are some of the core classes that you take if you're a library science major?
Now, I've kept up with it a little, and I've kept up with it less now that I'm 3 years retired from it. So I'm more interested in podcasting and writing and editing than I am in library work now. But way back when I was studying it, it was. I was going to say it was, we were using papyrus. No, it was things like cataloging and, what they used to call reference, which is answering questions at the desk, government documents, specialized publications like that. Systems. This will give you an idea how long ago it was. It was actually the entire calendar year of 1984. My systems assignment, now just imagine, was done using punch cards.
And so, do you know Dewey Decimal? Is he a friend of yours?
No, because what happens is that basically the division in the library world is that public libraries use Dewey Decimal, and academic libraries and research libraries, which is where I've worked all my career, use what's called the Library of Congress system. Okay. So the system that they use, they call it LC. All academic libraries use that. Dewey is only used in public libraries.
See, I went to public libraries as a kid, so Dewey was the only one I remember.
Right.
I remember your friend Oscar, and I think you two had websites that were sort of literary criticisms, where you would discuss books and in a way that like lay people could understand. And I always enjoyed kind of reading your summaries of why you liked something, why you didn't. And I never actually read the book that you guys were discussing because, it took a lot of time. But for our audience, what is it about books or authors that makes you like them or makes you want to avoid them?
That's a good question, actually, and a lot of people, because I read fewer books than I used to, but I watch a lot of film, and I have watched a lot of film, and it's the same sort of thing in all of them. It's not really about, for me anyway, and this is partly subjective, I think. It's not as if it's a hard and fast rule. Some people would hear what I'm saying and go, what the hell is he talking about? But it's not really story. I'm not interested in stories, and I'm not interested in, people talk about escaping from that sort. That's not what I'm interested in. When I read a book, for example, I'm interested in the usage of the words and the realism of the characters and that kind of thing, the realism of the dialogue. And there are lots and lots of books that, and I'm not criticizing them, but there's lots of books and lots of readers who are not so interested in that sort of thing. And partly that may come out of my training in English lit, but partly just for preference. And so turns of phrase and the style of the writing, those are the things that really appeal to me. As the same thing in film. I've seen lots of films that have virtually no story or very little of it, like a story. It's not an action movie or anything like that. I love action movies too. I like apart from musicals, I like pretty much anything. But they're done with a kind of a style and a realism that just really bowls you over. And those are the things that I like. So it has to do with, I always say quickly, it has to do with the how and not the what. How it's done, not really what it produces. It could be, like, one of my favorite books is called The Mezzanine, and it's by an American writer named Nicholson Baker. And it's a short book of about, I would say, just over 100 pages. And the entire book is about a man who, on his lunch break, takes a trip down an escalator and buys new shoelaces. That's the entire plot. But
it's a gripping tale of someone's shoelaces.
The book is brilliant, funny, satiric. He's got footnotes in it. The whole thing, it's basically, I guess, a kind of a parody in a way, but very brilliant, very witty. And a lot of people would go, I don't care. What is this?
I have no interest. Well, it shows there's a book for everyone. And I remember one of the posts you had that sat well with me was, there was a critic discussing maybe I don't remember the book, but you said, yes, this character is an awful person, and that's why I like reading about him, because it is fun to kind of learn like motivations from people that are unlike yourself. And that's what I like about reading, in part where it's like, I kind of feel like I'm seeing something I couldn't on my own. And sometimes it's just like cool linguistics, like you discussed. But I bring it up because I have my favorite author as a kid, and maybe, honestly, maybe to this day, is Roald Dahl. And he writes children's books, or wrote, he's since passed, but now I have a series of them that I read to my kids. And pretty recently, I don't know if it's going to happen, but there was scuttlebutt that they're going to change some of the words to kind of fit more contemporary culture. And I'm not calling it full on, like, it's not book burning. It's not saying you can't read it, but it is changing context. And someone who really cares about the words, I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
It's funny you should say that, because actually I also do a podcast. It's not as good as yours. I'll admit that right from the start, but
it's pretty damn close. It's very good. Please continue.
Let's say that yours is the best American podcast and mine is the best Canadian podcast.
We can agree on that. Sure.
Have you ever heard of Joe Rogan?
It doesn't ring a bell, but I think he's a boxer or something.
Yeah. Because I do my episode on Saturday is going to be exactly about that topic. The people who are doing this have done it. They recently did it. I say they because I think of them as a kind of an enemy of literature. Are called what they do is they take it to the publisher and give it what's called a sensitivity reading. Mm-hmm. So it's all part of the sort of the woke culture business. Mm-hmm. And they recently did it for all of Agatha Christie's novels, took out things that would be offensive. Then there was, this is supposed to be a good thing. And it's being done for all sorts of authors like that. There's an old line, you know even better than I do. There's an old line in stand-up comedy that you don't have the right not to be offended. Right. That's the right. You can stop. You don't have to listen to all comedians, mm-hmm. but you do not have the right to prevent a comedian from offending you. That's not at all. And this I find in the same kind of it's in the same roadway that what exactly is it in Roald Dahl or Agatha Christie? It probably is some outdated term or some stereotype that we're not amenable to these days and that sort of thing. But I think what's missing is that I think what's wrong is the reaction. The reaction is to remove it rather than to take it as a teachable moment to say, back in those days, this is how it was referred to. This is Agatha Christie. I mean, Jeepers Creepers. I don't want to be swearing. I'm Canadian, so I shouldn't do that. But it's ridiculous, really, right? So maybe they should take American Psycho, that book, and try put that through a sensitivity reading.
Well, as you mentioned, these are moments in time. And it can be educational, it can be interesting, it can be fun, it can be scary, it can be damning sometimes to look back. But I think tweaking it to make it more palatable for audiences, like you lose that opportunity. And also, God knows what you're going to lose in the story itself. It might just be a word here or there, but if you keep doing that, the whole reasoning behind why a book might be good can change. And
the other thing is the integrity of what the author wanted, right?
Right.
For whatever reason, they chose a certain word or whatever. It sort of is like taking like a painter's painting and saying, this would have been better as blue.
Right.
And to do
There's too much nipple here. I'm going to cover that up with the blouse or something.
Exactly.
I just said blouse. I showed my age, but. So you and I connected through the power of Kickstarter, and it was for a book we co-authored called Greg Giraldo, A Comedian Story. I'm sure everyone's bought a copy, but you can always buy more. What was it like? I guess what was your initial introduction to Greg Giraldo's work?
I believe it was I think it was it was either the comedy roasts or the Good Time to Cross a River, Good Day to Cross a River CD that he did. One of those. And so I became an immediate fan. And it wasn't long after I became a fan. Like I had been a fan for a few, like, for example, when he died, I had never heard of his work on Tough Crowd, which was some of the best work that he ever did on a show that many people have never heard of, which is really too bad. But of course, in the course of writing the book, we not only wrote about it, but I also watched a lot of grainy YouTube videos of him just being as brilliant as anything, right? So those were the things I think. And of course, you're always of two minds when you talk about Greg on the roast, because when he died, a lot of people kept referring to him, or in quick media, as a roast comedian, even an insult comedian, which is really, really ridiculous. But on the other hand, he was the best of the best of the best of the roasters. There hasn't been no one who's done it better than he has, because he completely took off the gloves, and absolutely nothing was sacrosanct, and those are the rules of roasting. Nothing is sacred, right?
And it kind of ties back to what we were talking about, Roald Dahl or Agatha Christie. It's like, if you just look at the words that came out of his mouth, like if you read a transcript, you'd be like, oh, this is a hateful person.
Exactly.
But it was quite the opposite. You mean, how can that be? But that's just kind of a quick aside. Aside from being an excellent writer, your ability to find kind of nuggets was invaluable to our process. Like you didn't just watch Tough Crowd. You found old archives of his first sitcom he did called Common Law. What I guess how did you kind of get this treasure hunter talent, for lack of a better word?
Part of it is working in libraries, and the one advantage of working in libraries, which, by the way, are bastions of free speech and bastions in the United States of you hear about book bannings and parents calling for books to be taken off the shelf because there's a Heather has two mommies kind of thing. You can't have that. Usually librarians will defend those and keep them on their goddamn shelves where they belong, kind of thing. But being a librarian, you go through a lot of technology. A lot has changed in libraries. They're not really, there's a kind of a stereotype of it being kind of a staid building where you borrow a few books on Sunday and you can go in and read some announcement on the poster. But there's a huge amount of technology behind what a library does. Like the modern research library is a marvel. I mean, the search tools that they have, and I've always been interested. I'm not a systems person or anything, but I've always been interested in searching things out, doing research and that kind of thing. So it was fun on the Giraldo book. I found a few things that took a lot of digging, didn't take a lot of digging, but took a lot of, if I might call it, imaginative searching to come up with. And my favorite one is probably, I don't think we would have found this otherwise, but he was married twice, married to his first wife. I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe a year or two, something like that. And she was a dental student at, was it Columbia? Was it Columbia?
I think it was Columbia. She was undergrad at Barnard and then dental at Columbia, I believe. Right.
So this is good. This is a long road to take for this. I feel like David Tell now. There's a long road to take for this punchline, but she, they put out a yearbook. But in the yearbook, they allowed people to print. They allowed the students to print comments from their significant other or whatever. So I managed to find out the comment that Greg made under his girlfriend's name in the yearbook. And we have that, and I think we quoted in the book. So, those are things that just take a little searching and you can find that stuff. So
said something about like you're a champion, minus the 150 pounds, you could be a boxer or something like that.
Exactly.
But it gave it color. It's one thing to have a photo of her, but it means way more to have, a snapshot of their interaction from that time. So other than, finding information on his first wife, what were some of the discoveries that you made or we made together that really stick out to you about Greg Giraldo?
Yeah, there's a fair number. I mean, the main one I think is that the gigantic contrast, like you were referring to earlier about, if you took the words that came out of his mouth during a roast, you'd say, what an evil, what a racist, misogynist bastard this is. He was not that, of course, at all, right? All we heard was how sweet he was. And from the women, he wasn't coming on to them. He was very friendly with them and very respectful and all that. The contrast between being a nice guy, if I can say that, but he had inner demons that had to do, they symptomized themselves in basically being addicted to alcohol and then taking drugs based on that. But where it came from was inside, and it had to do with not having a sense of himself, I don't want to say believing in himself because it wasn't one of those self-helpy kind of things. It had to do with, he didn't feel the talent that he really had. He couldn't see it. He couldn't feel it. And most people, if he could, I don't know, I'm not a psychologist, although I played one on TV. Was way back in the 70s, and just a couple episodes, that's it. If he had, maybe the drinking wouldn't have been necessary. And as we know from the research we did, it was the drinking that led him to take drugs as well, and the whole thing. But
and even before the drinking, it was some mental component that led him to drink, which then led him to take drugs. So it was like kind of understanding the sequence. I mean, that was, I don't that was a surprise to me. I just figured, he liked drinking, and then you drink too much, and then it kind of snowballs. But
Yeah.
what we learned from his family and some mental health professionals is like, no, there was more to it. It was a mental health disorder first, and it wasn't our job, and we weren't really qualified to say exactly what it is. But I think it's safe to surmise there was something. I mean, what you reminded me, Wayne, when Judy Gold, who we interviewed for the book, said she wanted to take Greg and shake him and say, like, you're good looking, you went to Harvard, you're so brilliant, you have this beautiful family, don't you see you have it all? And like, he couldn't see that. There's like,
No.
His framework was just wired differently.
Yeah, there's a similar, I mean, I remember similar quotes from several people as agents as well, saying, you got this sitcom when you were right at the beginning of your career, you're doing well, you're doing excellent in stand-up, you're funny as hell. Because he used to, he would also make this, I guess it has to be said, there's a lot of comedians who are famous and successful and rich who frankly just aren't that funny. And he was funny, but he wasn't, he was just on the cusp of becoming a known name. And that occasionally happens, that you get someone who's actually funny and they're successful on TV. Sure. And it would have been something to see, but of course he died when he was 44, I think. So just a horrific thing. But he was obviously very skilled. And of course, that's often a thing about people who are brilliant, right? They have
Don't
this.
I know it? Yeah, go ahead.
That's why I say I'll live to 100. There'll be nothing going on in here, but at least I'll be mobile.
The heart will be pounding.
That's whatever machine I'm attached to. No, but often brilliant people have this kind of self-destructive element in them, or this the thing we discuss in the book is this imposter syndrome mindset, where they feel that they're a fake, and they're not. And right. Often what happens is the opposite is true too. I'll go back to the comedians, and some comedians think they're funny as hell, and you go, well, I wonder why I'm not laughing. Yeah.
Right. They have an overconfidence problem. It's kind of the opposite. It's strange. Yeah. It's an industry where there's so much self-loathing, but then you obviously have to feel worthy enough to take the stage, because otherwise you wouldn't do it. It's like you have to feel like, all right, there's a reason for me being here.
Yeah.
It's kind of a strange push and pull, but I want to talk, because we have a fair amount of writers or people in publishing on the show. And I think everyone's story is different, in the story of how you write a book or your process. I guess, what are some of the big learning experiences you gleaned from working on the Giraldo project?
Actually, one of the big ones was from you. And what I learned is how to write in a more, I don't know what the word is, populist sort of way. And it's actually, and I mean that term in the most positive sense, because I don't, people don't want to know the nitty gritty of it, but I think I tended to write a little too sort of stiff and academically, and I got into the habit. I learned how to do that through seeing your writing, and through seeing, editors also reminded me / us that, we were going about it the wrong way. And it turned out great. I think if you can say that about your own book, well, it's like saying you like your child. I think the book turned out excellently. The writing is good. The writing is very uniform. A lot of the comments we've had online are about how good it is to read, how easy it is to read. But that's what I learned that. And it's actually been good for me, because I'm just finishing another book now, and I'm specifically designating it for the general reader. And I'm keeping in very much in mind a lot of the lessons I learned from co-writing the Giraldo book with you.
So we're writing for the people. Well, I mean, I think it was a good push and pull, because I had a big fear, and I still do, but I'm better at it, of the blank page. And oftentimes we do. I'm so grateful this was a biography, because most of the source material was interviews and firsthand interviews. And so I knew there was content there, but it was so much like, damn, how am I going to actually like translate this into something that's readable? And you didn't have the same fear that I did of just getting something on there, because inevitably it's going to be revised 100 times. But I think that push and pull, Wayne, I think that's what I'm most proud of. And it was also hard, just kind of making it a uniform voice, because there's certainly chapters you wrote more of, and there's some I wrote more of, and I remember kind of having a like oh shit moment weeks before publishing, like, will it be really obvious? Like, this is Wayne's, this is Matt's, this is and
I think the parts that include the surfer lingo, I think people understand that that's you, and the parts about moose and donuts, they know that's about me.
If it's more than 2 syllables, Wayne wrote that word. I think that. Well, I remember we had an editor who came highly regarded from an author who was prolific. He had several books, and she wasn't cheap. Which it doesn't mean she's great, but kind of shows like people are going to pay for work. And what was I don't want to reveal it. We sent a manuscript. Wayne, what were the first notes she gave, to the extent that you remember?
Yeah, no, she was brilliant, and in a certain way, she saved the book, because basically, and I will take responsibility. These are early drafts, by the way. The book didn't end up like this, but basically, I was a little too taken with the quotes, and I thought we should use that as much as we can. And so we would have little bits of text that one of us had written, and then a long quote, little bits of text and a long quote. And then the editor said, this looks like the outline for a book. And she was exactly right. I mean, you have to take you pick the best, you pick the quotes that have the really greatest wording in them, but the other ones you just sort of write yourself, and you acknowledge the source, but you don't have to use someone's wording. And once we did that and broke out the quotes and made it all kind of a piece, then that was basically the second phase. And then, like you say, it went through many revisions after that and turned into what it became. Yeah,
I think that was at least a year and a half before it came out, but we had been working on it for over a year. So it shows my naivete. I thought, well, there'll be some grammatical errors. Maybe she'll tweak this or that. But I remember initially reading it and being like, oh, damn, like, we got to not start over, but, and I'm so glad she did it, but it was hard to take. But I was thinking, like, I'm so much happier I found out in that context than if someone just rushed the project and was like, all right, this is ready. Imagine how embarrassing that would be.
It would be.
So and subsequent to that, we pitched it to other groups, and we ended up doing our own thing, which I'm thankful for. But inevitably, like any creative project, you get shot down, so people don't like it. And nothing stung that much. I mean, I'm not to say I liked it when a publisher says we weren't going to pick it up, but nothing hurt like that first email from her hurt. But it like toughened me up. I don't know. It's like after that, I could handle a lot more criticism.
I remember it well myself, and I remember feeling disheartened by it. But the thing she didn't criticize, and I would credit you for this, is that we started with a good outline. And by outline, I don't mean something that was scribbled on a piece of paper, but you had a good idea of the flow of the book. So I don't believe, as I remember, there were critiques about, well, this is in the wrong order, or where did this come from? There wasn't a lot of that. So we basically, I mean, in a way, she was right. We had the outline for a book, so we turned it into a book. So we had an excellent outline with quotes all picked out, all set to go. We just had to write it all, to sort of like, putty that we had to smooth out and make a good sidewalk.
Right. No, I like that analogy. It's like the foundation was there. You just had to make it smoother. And, I think a big takeaway from that and in the weeks immediately following it was, for me, I just needed to build confidence, because I think relying on quotes from other people is a way of taking a back seat and just saying, all right, this is what they said, but you have to make a lot more judgment calls when you write in your own form, when it's through your own voice, because you're saying like, all right, I think this section is more important than this, and I choose to highlight something and not the other. Am I speaking out of my ass, or what say you, Wayne Jones?
Well, I can only see from here, so I'm not quite sure.
My mouth's also moving.
Who knows where the microphones are located? I have no idea. No, you're not. And even I think even in a book like this, where you're having quotes, there is some judgment that we made as the writers about what to use and how to interpret it, and even whether you give credence to it. There's certain things that we didn't use because either we found it wasn't germane to the book, or perhaps was a little bit dubious in its assertions, and you leave those out of the book. So,
and I think that was an underrated, difficult part of the, figuring out what to omit, and also just piecing together things. I mean, it gave me a lot less faith in eyewitnesses, because I remember interviewing people about his first week in law school, and these are people that don't have an axe to grind. It's not some controversial subject. They're not trying to get on the Supreme Court or something. And there'd be very different accounts of what happened during the same time. Now, in reality, maybe one person was confusing the second semester with the first semester, or the third year for the first, it was 30-ish years ago. I mean, it happens, but we'd have interviews and we're like, there's no way these both can be true simultaneously. Right. What do we do?
Right. Someone was just telling me that memory works like that. Like, it's not as if memory is not like a camera kind of thing. It basically, it'll get up there and be organized for a while, but eventually some things will get associated with other things. Even
there'll be overexposure, the aperture will change. There's a lot of variables.
Exactly. And eventually you get down to just a kind of a blank, and you have a tube out of your mouth kind of thing. So
well, we'll have to have you back, but what I guess are some takeaways that you learned from co-authoring that you would teach to other people who might embark on a similar venture?
Hyper organization, so that literally and figuratively, so to speak, both authors are on the same page. Each person doing their part, and each knowing what the other is doing, so that you're not overlapping. And also too, and I felt you were excellent in this, because I always thought of it as, it was your Kickstarter thing. In a certain way, I always thought of it as your book, and you were good enough to bring me on as co-author. You have to let your ego go and say, yeah, Matt, that sounds like a better idea. And you very, very often said to me, yeah, that's a better way to do it. So to just let it go, because the idea is not for me to, showcase my talents, right, and that kind of thing. The idea is to produce a great book. And that's important. It's sort of like on road trips. I've been on road trips with several people, and you need a person who's super flexible, who will sometimes do what you want and you do what they want, that kind of thing. And then when you're on a road trip with an inflexible person, that's not going to be a good ending. You'll either end up running into a pole or running over a pedestrian.
You'll ditch him at a truck stop bathroom and never see him again.
Yeah, that's right. You have to go to the bathroom. Oh, no, I don't. Yes, you do.
Yes, you do.
But yeah, no, it was great that way. You were gracious and generous.
Well, I think it helped in a sense that we didn't know each other super well before. Now, obviously, we know each other much better now, but there was still kind of politeness. But then, even from the outset, Wayne, it was like, we want to make a really good story, so we had to put our feelings aside. Like if you never said I don't like this, or you never did it to like just make me feel bad, and I never did it for you. It was always about the final product. But I think being able to have that push and pull made it a lot better than if I would have just done it on my own. And
Yep.
Hopefully if you had just taken the reins and done it all on your own.
Yep, I totally agree with you. And you have to have two people who are willing to do that. And so I can imagine teams of two people getting to write and just having a little too much ego or wanting too much of their stuff in the book. That's not how it works. Think about the end product, because the reader doesn't give a damn how much I wrote or how much you wrote, right? The reader wants to read a book that's smooth and goes along and is well written. And, yeah.
That's a very good point. And I'm curious, what are you most proud of, whether it's about this project or any project you've worked on?
I'm very proud of this book. And I don't mean that in a, the kind of pride in the Bible that'll send me to hell. But I mean, I really feel we did a good job. We didn't get all the interviews we wanted. There's always things you can dig out. Yeah. We never did find that McDonald's placemat, which I looked for. Damn that. That'll be the second edition.
V2.
Yeah. So I'm very proud of this, and I'm writing a book now. The person that I studied at university was an 18th century writer named Samuel Johnson. And I'm writing a biography of him. And there have been many written, but almost all of them have been academic, have been for scholars. So I'm writing a biography of Samuel Johnson for the general reader. And that's what I was referring to earlier when I said that the lessons I learned from writing the Giraldo book will be very helpful. Well, actually, I'm nearly finished it, so have been very helpful in writing this book, because I don't want it to be it's not going to be an academic book, and I'm going to indie publish it probably. It probably might be as early as May this year, but sometime this spring. Yeah.
Well, we'll have to publicize that. So whether it's Sam Johnson for the people or Wayne Jones for the proletariat, where can people learn more about you, Wayne, and what you're up to?
Just go to my website, waynejones.ca, and you'll find links to everything I do except for private things.
Wayne Jones, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Matt. It's always good to do anything with you, either write a book or have a chat. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Matt Balaker podcast. To learn more, please check out mattbalaker.com and encourage your friends to like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate it.